My name is Pete Gifford. I'm from the Crawford County Historical Society. I'd like to welcome you here to Cordia Commons for our program on Meadville Rye Whiskey. To start with, I'd like to thank Jill Andrews from Cordia Commons, who graciously provided all the refreshments tonight and the space and the chairs and more chairs and chairs from downstairs and other rooms and every place else. Our program tonight is a history of Meadville Rye Whiskey, which was a major product of Meadville at one point. Our speaker tonight is Alan DeMason from Mentor, Ohio. He's a Meadville native, graduated from Meadville High School in 1965. After that, got his bachelor's degree from Edinburgh University, BS in mathematics. Has a master's degree from John Carroll and additional graduate work at Case Western Reserve. He is the president of the Ohio Bottle Collectors Society. He's currently the treasurer of the Federation of Historic Bottle Collectors and has, as you can see, a large collection of memorabilia relating to Meadville Rye Whiskey. He's also studied the history, and now he'll tell us about it. Alan.
Thank you. I'll talk nice and loud so everybody can hear me, okay? You have a little handout right there, and I'll kind of refer to some of the things that are on there just to kind of give you an idea of what's going on with the Meadville Rye, okay? And we'll start on the side that has just the writing on it and not the pictures on this side right here. And back in 1860, the property that I know as Ray Street Lumber was started with the Pfeiffer and Richards. They established a distillery there back in 1860. In 1885, the Meadville, Pennsylvania Distilling Company, which is what we know as the Meadville Rye Whiskey, bought Pfeiffer Distillery back in 1885. They bought that. They were a Buffalo interest. There was more Buffalo people that were involved in that than there was anybody else. And so they established their headquarters in Buffalo, New York. Ellicott Square, which is actually still there, became the home office of Meadville Rye Whiskey. A lot of Meadville Rye Whiskey actually headed for New York for that very reason. The general manager was a gentleman by the name of H.P. Werner. The secretary was Frank S. Dorn. And about 1887, another gentleman came into being a secretary. His name was J.H. Prescott was the secretary. When they first started the brewery back in 1885, they were able to handle 25 bushels of grain a day. Okay? And by the time the Centennial was published, they were up to 200 barrels of bushels of grain a day. To kind of understand the operation, you kind of have to have a little idea of what's happening when you distill something, when you make Meadville Rye Whiskey. And I got a little flow chart there that kind of gives you an idea, and I'm kind of going to go through that so that you kind of have an idea. So when I start talking about the distillery, the fermenting building, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. Rye grains, barley grains, are made up primarily of starch, and they make perfect ingredients for a rye whiskey. And what you would do is you would take the rye and the barley along with what is called a rye mash. Now, a rye mash is what they do is they take the rye, they lay it on the floor, they water it, and they allow it to start to sprout. When the sprout gets to be about 1 to 3 times the length of the grain, they then start to turn it over and over and start a drying process. Usually took anywhere from 15 to 20 days to dry that. Then they ground it up, and that's where they got the rye malt from. It's called a rye malt. So they took the barley, the rye, and the rye malt, and they mixed it together in what was called a mash tun. And you can look right there, I kind of got the flow chart going right down there. They would put 70-degree water with that, and the mash tun, what it would do would be just like a big agitator. I just kind of thought of it as my mom's old wringer washer, okay? It would just agitate that right there, and it would agitate it from about 2 to 3 hours. And when it was done agitating with that, they kept on increasing the heat to it till it got to 160 degrees, and this mash tun would just continually rotate that, okay? And then when that was completely done, they would take all the liquid that came off of that, and they called that liquid wort, was the name of that liquid. The rest of it that came off of it, the spent grain, they called slop. And slop was sold to or used as to feed cattle. And that was actually a byproduct of what Meadville Rye Whiskey had. Is right near there, right on the property, they had cattle there. So they took it right from there, right to the cattle, and fattened up cattle, and then they sold cattle off of that. And that was a business that actually happened off of that, okay? Now from that, the wort went into what was called a fermenter. Now the fermenter was actually, they were going to do the fermenting. Now remember I told you that the rye whiskey, or the rye, was a large starch. When they put it in that mash turn, it turned it to a sugar. By mixing it with the water and everything, it became mostly sugar, okay? Then that went down there, and then when you add yeast to sugar, yeast eats sugar like crazy, okay? And what the yeast did was it changed that sugar to alcohol. And that's what they did. And a byproduct of that, they added the yeast, and the amount of yeast that they added and everything had to be particular. They were so particular in what they did. The grain was exactly 12% moisture when they used it, okay? Everything was exact. They felt that they had the best water around. They were so particular. The grain had to be meticulously clean when they put it in there so that it produced exactly what they wanted. Then after 3 days of adding this yeast to this and mixing it, you now had a lot of alcohol in there, plus some waste, some leftover yeast, some leftover stuff. Then it would go to the what was called the pot still. That's for the actual distilling. You would then, and we've all seen the illegal distillers on Barney Fife and everything like that, where they're chasing them. Well, this was a legal one, okay? And they would take and they would go ahead and heat that. The alcohol would evaporate, and when it evaporated, it would then condense, and there would be your rye whiskey. You get your rye whiskey coming out of there, okay? And then it was barreled. And then 4 years later, after aging process happened, it was ready to be consumed, okay? So it was a pretty good process. So if you can kind of remember where I kind of started you at, and that was the fact that they started off with 25 bushels of rye in the earlies, and by the 1888 they were up to about 200 barrels. The business in the 1889 tax records, the business value of the Meadville Rye Whiskey was $3,500. They had 6 lots with 6 buildings on them. The value of those was $2,700. They had 2 vacant lots, $300. Can you imagine that? 2 vacant lots over there at $300. The total was the value of the business was $6,500. They paid a tax that year of $46.50. Okay, hasn't changed, has it? Okay. In 1891, they took on a huge expansion. This is when I believe, if you turn to the front of your paper right there, the top is what that plant looked like in about 1890. That actually came from a very early Meadville Rye Whiskey right here. That's that picture right here. This is a very, very early Meadville Rye Whiskey receipt that they gave out. Okay, and that's this was actually dated 1892. They were still using the same stationery at that point in time, but the building had actually begun. From right there, it's then that they built 4 huge warehouses. The warehouses, the only thing that's left of the warehouses now, if you go over to Ray Street Lumber, you'll see some foundations that are there. They're 50 feet by 112 feet. One of the buildings was 7 stories. 2 of the buildings were 7 stories tall. 2 of them were 8 stories tall. Okay? And you can actually, if you look down on the bottom picture, you can see the huge warehouse building where they stored the barrels of whiskey then. Those were built in 1891. Obviously, they're not there anymore. The company was in the 1892 tax records. They valued the business now at $4,000. It's still not much. 14 buildings are on there, valued at $8,800. 8 vacant lots at $450. Total of $13,250. Tax on that, $92.79. They incorporated back in 1901. That's kind of important because that happens to kind of age some of my stuff. As I look up and start looking at some of the bottles that I've collected, I can pick up a bottle right here, and if it has the word incorporated on it, I know that this was bottled after 1901. Okay? So it helps me a whole lot. This is probably, and I didn't realize it until just shortly here, this is probably one of my oldest bottles right here. Okay, not a very fancy label with it, but it's a nice bottle. This one doesn't have the incorporation date on it, so it's a pretty early bottle right there. Okay, I'm going to talk about this stuff too in just a little bit here as we go along. In 1904, Meadville experienced its biggest boom year to date. A lot of stuff came into Meadville. It was a time when people were spending money. The investors of Meadville, PA Distilling Company put $50,000, that's a huge amount of money back in 1904, into improvements, okay? They built a distilling building, a large drying plant, a large boiler house, but they were all brick buildings. And if you go over to Ray Street Lumber, probably almost every one of those brick buildings was built in 1904. The other buildings that were the wood from before, probably none of them exist. I was over there. Fortunately, I was able to take some pictures over there. I got permission, and so I didn't see a whole lot of anything that was over there. They also added a drying room, a drying plant. Remember I told you that they took the slop, and the slop was used to feed all the local cattle, and they did. They sold that off as where they could. In 1904, they stopped doing that. They needed to dry that stuff, and as soon as they started drying it, they sold that. Most of that went to Germany. Okay, so it became a place to get rid of that stuff right there. They bagged it. They sold it to Germany. Okay, in 1912, they had the capacity of producing on that facility 18,000 barrels of whiskey in 1 year. Okay. I don't think they did it. I don't think that plant ran for a complete year. I think it probably only ran 7, 8, or 9 months, which would have cut down on how much they could produce. But they did produce they could have produced a huge amount of it. In that year, a gentleman by the name of G.L. Kratz he was a chemist and biologist He was actually the plant manager then. He figures very, very predominantly in the history of Meadville Rye Whiskey. 1914 was the beginning of World War I. It was also the beginning of the temperance movement, where it really got a lot of support, prohibition. And in 1916, Judge Thomas J. Prather refused to issue liquor licenses for Crawford County. Crawford County went dry on March 1st, 1916. I happened to be doing some research. I happened to run into an article from the Evening Republican. And the Evening Republican, it was actually on May 1st, the first day of everything being dry. And I'd like to read it, because it's really, I was entertained with it, and I think you would be too. The boozing element, okay, it says, "Wets celebrate the dying hours of old barley corn. Couldn't drink it all, but valiantly did the very best they could. A good-natured crowd of boozers out for the last carouse." The boozing element, just imagine Meadville at that point in time. The boozing element of the old town was so busy Tuesday night doing its best to dispose of what was left of the local stock before midnight, toiled the death of licensed selling. That there was no time for quarreling. There was an amount of drinking that would put any old-time circus day to shame and make a 4th of July celebration look like a Sunday school picnic in comparison. Good nature ruled the orgy, okay? I mean, I can't even imagine this in Meadville at 1916, them writing this, okay? And the celebration closed without anything serious in the way of trouble. The streets presented a summer Saturday night appearance. So many were out to see the doings, and at nearly every bar in town, there was a throng of patrons that would make a dealer rich in a month. There was so much to be done before the coming of the dreary midnight's cheerless hour that the rush called for the presence of a couple of policemen in front of one popular place on Chestnut Street, just as a matter of precaution, though everything moved along smoothly, in fact, swimmingly. Most of the bars closed at the usual hour, 10 o'clock. The Garreau, Midland, and Bud remained open until midnight to accommodate the unusual thirst. While a good many carried full tanks under their vest, the armament of bottles were also notable. So obviously they were buying a few to take home, okay? And there was really no occasion for the good old song, "How Dry I Am," though it was heard many times, okay? After my father passed away, my brother was going through his stuff, and in my dad's stuff was a used Meadville Rye Whiskey stationery, okay? And he found it, he called me, he says, "You're not going to believe what I found," and lo and behold, he found this right in there. And it basically says, "To our patrons, the sale of our Meadville Rye at retail will be discontinued on March 1st, after which date we will be unable to sell you direct." Okay? And they sent it out to everybody. They actually continued to sell. They went to Erie, and they sold it up in Erie until Prohibition came actually in. So that was kind of interesting. We found that. That was kind of cool. We were able to find that in there. On January 16th, 1919, Article 18, which was Prohibition. Prohibition became the law. You could no longer sell anything. What was left over in the Meadville was sent to Frankfort, Kentucky. Barrels to Frankfort, Kentucky. Frankfort, Kentucky, you could still get alcohol, but you had to get, it had to be medicinal alcohol, okay? The ones with the spider on them, right here, okay, are your medicinal alcohol, okay? And this actually has the Meadville, this is actually Meadville, Pennsylvania Distilling Company on it. These two right here. This one was made in the spring of 1915. Remember I told you that it took 4 years to get aged, but it was bottled in 1925. So this one actually would have gone, it would have been bottled in 1919, but Prohibition was there. Okay? That should be the end of Meadville Rye Whiskey, but it's not. Okay? The old owners decided that they were going to try to do something on that property. They formed a company called French Valley Springs Incorporated. They were going to make an aged ginger ale. They had the water, they had all the facilities. They started to produce a ginger ale that was aged. And unfortunately, they priced themselves out of the market. They had to close in 1924. It was just too costly to run it. The plant was sold to an S. Snyder Corporation. S. Snyder dismantled and sold off all the equipment on Meadville Rye Whiskey. It was all gone. It was then sold to a gentleman by the name of David P. Wheeler. David P. Wheeler thought that the warehouses were too tall, so he ripped those down. Okay, so those were gone. He passed away a year later, and it was sold to Keystone Construction, where it stayed until 1933, when Prohibition was repealed. There was a group that was headed by A.F. Miller, organized, petitioned the Harrisburg to get the old name back again. He was able to do it. He was granted a charter with, he had $50,000 when he got the charter. In 1937, he went back to amend his charter. He had sold stock. He sold 100,000 shares of stock. The company now had $1 million in there. They found the old worker, Mr. Krantz. They found him. He had the original formula, which was important. He had the original yeast processing. And he had the yeast culture, which was amazing. He, of course, sold it back to them. They hired him as general manager to oversee the plant, and they started business again. And the last note I have is that it went out of business in 1947, and I don't know whether that's true or not because I didn't write down where I got it from, but I just kind of wrote it down. Ironic, it went out of business the same year that I was born. So, it was just they were very, very particular in their whiskey. I happened to be very, very fortunate. I got a full bottle of it. We're not opening it tonight, by the way. It is a full bottle. This one was actually made in 1914. It was bottled in 1918. It's a rare find. I'm happy to have one. Meadville Rye Whiskey in the early years would send barrels out, and when it went to a saloon, when it went to a bar, they would store it in the basement. And then they would go down and they would fill in what is called a back bar bottle. This is a back bar bottle. Okay, it's cloudy. Haven't gotten it cleaned, but you have to go through a special process. You just don't wash it out. You have to go through this process, and I'm real nervous because this is the only one I've ever seen like this, and I really don't want it to break. Okay, and there is a possibility that could happen. But what they would do is they would have this on the back of the bar right there, and when you wanted Meadville Rye, they would just fill it right out of here. And then when this emptied, they'd go downstairs to the barrel and they'd fill it up this way. Okay? I have, this one I've only seen 2 of these. This one's a real early one. This is old Meadville rye. This is what is on the bottom is called a refired pontle, which makes the bottle very, very old. A pontle is where the glass blower actually attached the blow pipe to the bottom. Then they broke it off. This bottle would not have sat very well, so what they would have done is heated it up again, and they would have done that. But that's a back bar bottle also. This one is probably the more common back bar bottle. It's etched. I called a guy on a phone to buy this thing, and I read his advertisement in the Meadville paper, just out of pure luck, okay? And I asked him, he says, well, do you know Meadville? I says, well, kinda, okay? He says, well, I live on Limber Road. Well, my aunt lives on Limber Road, okay? And I says, well, whereabouts? Well, here to find out he was 2 doors from my aunt, okay? So I happened to be able to get that one. This one, I happened to get, this one, this is called a pinch bottle. It was originally made, and then what they did at the back, they pinched it in, okay? It's called a pinch bottle. It's got a real nice glass stopper on it also. This one I actually bought. I ran into a guy down in Columbus at a bottle show, and he said he had one of these things. And I said, where's your house at, okay? And it just so happened it was on the way back from Columbus to Cleveland, so I stopped and got that one right there. My collecting actually started with a conversation with George Deschner, my longtime friend. We were talking one day, and he says, if you ever run into anything Meadville Rye whiskey, pick it up. So I went to the Pittsburgh Bottle Show, and a gentleman by the name of Bill Fry, which has since passed away, from Jamestown, Pennsylvania, had 7 items sitting on his table of Meadville Rye whiskey. He had this sign right here, and you'll be able a chance to come up right here. He had this sign right here. This is an elderly gentleman in a chair, and he's kind of sipping on a little bit of Meadville Rye whiskey, I hope. And he's got a bottle right there, and it's an advertising sign. I got that from him. I got this Meadville Rye whiskey box right here, okay? And this one right here, if you look very carefully on the back, I'll show it on another one, but this box right here has her on the front right there, have her on the back, have a real nice there. The back is really beat up, okay? And what makes this one kind of interesting is that still on the inside is where this box was sent to back that many years. It was sent to Bradford, Pennsylvania. It's got the company name in there, too. So that was kind of cool. And I mean, if you don't look for it, you really don't see it. So it was pretty cool right there. He also was the one that I got this bottle from right here, which is very, very early. And this is one that he also had right there. And I think the 2 other bottles are in George's possession. Okay? I think they're there, okay? Inside of these boxes, this box right here actually had the tax stamp on the back of it, and they were very, very good. It actually told you when it was made. This was actually made in 1914. It was actually bottled in 1918. So they were very, very good. I'm always impressed with everything that I've been there. Those of you that are familiar with Annie Stewart's and William Moore's book right here, there's a couple pictures in here that you may think of. One is this stationery right there. This one I got from a gentleman in Conneaut Lake. This is actually the original Meadville Rye whiskey label right there. I framed it up. It's a real nice piece right there. And on the back, they've got a real nice trading card they really tried to depict Meadville Rye as being something that was definitely it wasn't, okay? They've got a couple, looks like little kids on an egg right there. That's there. There's actually two of them, and I have both of those right there. And you're welcome to come up and see those afterwards right there. I finally got a Meadville shot glass. Finally found one of those. This one's from Buffalo, New York. Remember I told you, Buffalo connection right up there, a whole lot. I had my Buffalo from right up there. This bottle is, I don't buy broken bottles, damaged stuff. I just don't, if it's a bottle. But a Meadville Rye whiskey I buy, okay? Because I'm not interested in the bottle, I'm interested in the label. Okay, the label's the important thing. They didn't have anything embossed. This is from People's Liquor Company, and it's 126 Seneca Street, Buffalo, New York. Now, a lot of the stuff that you'll get is actually, you'll find it has a New York label on it, because we ship barrels up there, and then they bottle it up there with their own label on it. So this was from Seneca. This one is from Youngstown, Ohio. It's a Meadville Rye whiskey, and it's from Youngstown, Ohio. This one is from, this is kind of ironic. Here's another one. This one was from 126 Seneca. This is from 272 Seneca. Okay? So a block away, they're putting Meadville Rye whiskey, different labels, and they were definitely making their own. These two are from Parrish, New York, right here. These are from Parrish, New York. This one's from Montreal, Canada, okay? This one has a tax stamp of 1928 on it. So a couple of those barrels got to Canada and were bottled in Canada. Who knows how they got there, but they did. This is actually, believe it or not, a very common one. I don't know. Somebody I think up in New England managed to buy quite a few of those. This one was kind of cool. This one's from Cleveland, Ohio. Okay, this one's from Cleveland, Ohio, right up there. This one also doesn't. This one doesn't have the incorporated on that one either. So I figured that one to be a fairly early. This is actually a sleeve that would have gone inside of one of these boxes. Okay, to protect those. So, and it has the cardboard on the, kind of a corrugated cardboard on the bottom to protect the bottles. And you would have put 12 in there, and that's what you would have done with that one. This is a very, very nice one. This is a Cronin from Troy, New York, and it's a real nice jug right here. In fact, there's a couple of those of you that are on eBay. There was two that sold on eBay just within the last month or so. They were very, very nice. If I didn't have so many of them, anytime I get one that looks like this, I buy it. Okay? They're such a nice collectible right there. There is what else do I got to show you? Oh, two advertising mirrors. These are advertising mirrors right there. This one I bought down in Adamstown, which is halfway between Harrisburg and Philadelphia, in an antique store. I was walking down there, and fortunately, I had this one. So as I walked by, I went, "Whoa! Look at that!" Okay, so I got that. Okay, couple other things on the back. On the back of your that little pamphlet I gave you right there, I kind of outlined some of the buildings out there, so that you can kind of see what they actually did out there. So if you look at the picture right at the bottom, right down here, okay, the buildings that are remaining. Let me borrow yours, George. Okay, the buildings that are remaining out there. If you were to go out there now, the one with the looks like a double tower, a little tower going up there. Okay. That was the fermenting building, okay? That's where they went in there and they mixed the yeast. Remember I talked about that? That building is actually standing. And next to it, out there, you'll see the distillery, and the yeast room that's also standing. Half of the building, you see where the smokestack is right there? Half of that building is standing. The smokestack is gone, but half of it is actually standing, okay? And there would have been a coal bin on the other side. There would have been a coal bin there. And the other one that's actually standing right there is what was the slop steam dryer. That one is also standing. That's also brick. And the other one, there's a place where there's barrel storage there. That building is also standing. They're all brick. Okay? Two of my prized possessions up here is this young lady right here. I bought that at Burton, the Burton Antique show. It's a lithograph. It's got the original frame on it. The original backing was very, very nice. This one right here, which is probably the prized possession of anybody's Meadville Rye Whiskey collection, is the tin sign. I got the tin. I bought the tin at an auction out in actually east of here, out in Courier Franklin. But I had it was an oak frame around it, and I happened to get the opportunity to buy the frame, and I knew it had a little bit of damage, and so I bought it. And it had a Meadville Rye Whiskey sign in it that was really very, very beat up. So I was just interested in the frame. So the guy packed it up and he sent it to me. And when I opened it up, I was utterly disgusted with the way he packed it. This sign was just beat all up. It was separated. This is a kind of a molding right here. This kind of a anyways, part of that had come off. So a lot of love went into that thing to get it back to the way it is right now. But it's a beautiful sign. I have this right up here too. For those of you that when you come up and you want to see some of this stuff, I do a lot of. I'm real proud of Meadville Rye, and I display it whenever I can. I display it at bottle shows. When I walk in with Meadville Rye, they know I'm there. Okay. But what I did was I have pictures of the old buildings and what they actually look like then, according to that in the right here.
Why does it say your salary is so high?
Pardon? Actually, what they used to do, I'll show you that right here, is every company, what they did was they got the stationery, and then they put their own name on it.
Oh, okay. So that was the Meadville though, but they kept using the Meadville as like the prototype.
Yeah. No, actually what they did was Meadville, they probably got the stationery from Meadville because they were probably, or they had to purchase it, and then they put their own logo on it. Then they wrote their own little name, whatever they had on it, because this is an advertisement
For Meadville.
For Meadville Rye.
Okay.
Yeah. Everything that's up here actually relates to Meadville Rye in some direction. This is probably one of the earliest things, and I have to thank George for this, okay? This is a Meadville Rye calendar from 1891. And it actually still has January on it. It's got a fold going through the middle, but it's still an awful difficult piece to find. This one, this is actually, this right here, this is a Meadville Rye Whiskey corkscrew. Okay, and it's inside of a wooden sleeve. It's inside of a wooden sleeve. Again, some of the stuff, I'm sure that other people have this stuff out there. This one, I collect just about everything that I can get my hands on. This bottle, you know, I kind of rescue some of this stuff. This bottle obviously is damaged right at the top. The top is broken off and everything, but it is Meadville Rye Whiskey. And it was back, and it was incorporated, and so I got two of them that are actually very similar, but I just kind of hold on to everything. And just a couple more things. Yeah.
There's a silver pickup truck on Orchard Street that's blocking somebody's driveway, and they'd really like it to be moved. If somebody could do that, please.
The early people were very ingenious. It actually has Meadville on it. It looks like it was probably a different type of liquor on it and cut it off and added their own Meadville at the top. This is from Dunkirk, New York, which is a very unique label up there. This one right here is an unused label, and I do believe now that the reason why it's unused is because it was printed wrong. When it was printed, they did not put the word incorporated at the bottom, so it made the label unusable. And you never see this label on any bottle because it did not have the incorporated. You see similar ones. This one's very, very similar right here, but it's got the incorporated on it. So I think this was a mistake. So it was kind of neat. Does anyone have any questions at all?
I have a question.
Yes.
What proof whiskey did they make?
100 proof.
They made 100 proof.
50% of it was alcohol, so it was 100 proof. Okay?
You didn't mention it, you know, and I thought.
Yeah, that's a good question. Good question. Hi, Scott.
Did they ever do postcards?
No. As far as I know, there's not a single postcard out there, and I have not seen a single picture with Meadville Rye, anything in Meadville Rye in it. And I'm going to guess probably it probably had to do with, there was a lot of breweries around here, and there was a lot of, I think there was quite a bit of problems with the people and everything, with them, you know, alcohol and everything. I think they tried to keep it nice and low. I do believe when Prohibition came in, a lot of the material, a lot of stuff, records and everything were destroyed at that point in time. I think it was a matter of we're going to destroy it so that the government can't get a hold of it, and they just destroyed it. I know I'd like to go to Buffalo. I was hoping to, you know, with the internet and everything, you can email historical societies. I'd like to get some information from Buffalo, but with budget cuts and everything, they say, we'd love to help you, come to Buffalo and we'll help you. They won't do it on the internet. So that'll be a one-tank trip one of these days from Cleveland. Anyone else? Yes?
Who made the bottle?
I have no clue. The only thing I can tell you, is that in the 1800s, middle 1800s, the container was worth more than what you put into it. Okay? And so consequently, bottles were just not, okay, we used up this bottle and threw it away. They actually would go back and refill a lot of the stuff that they had, okay? And so I'm almost, most of their bottles that they had were the brown type, like that. And they're all almost exactly the same type. These two right here, okay, are identical in the way they are. Some of the other stuff, I think people like these guys right here that are putting bottles in this, I think they were looking just for the cheapest bottle they could find to slap a label on it and make some money. Okay? But it probably came from wherever was the cheapest and where was the handiest. That's a guess.
Approximately what year were bottles blown, and what year were they machine made?
They stopped being blown. 1880 was probably the last time that you really start seeing blown bottles. Machine-made bottles then were about 1890-ish, 1900. They started machine making. Then as soon as they started making machine bottles, then the container was worth less than what you put in it. So then it became a throwaway. Okay? Yes?
Could you give us a feel for like what the value is in some of those collectibles that you have? Just a range, you know, this bottle's worth $20.
Okay. Some of this I can't. Some of this I don't know. Okay. it would be a fair guess. My wife's here too, so I don't want to let too much out. Okay? She really doesn't know. Like some of the stuff, she kind of has an idea what I spent on it, but God knows I want to go home and not be in too much trouble. Okay. This one right here is probably the premier. I know for a fact that, but this one's not mint. Okay. This one for a mint one years ago was selling $2,500. Okay. It's not worth $2,500 because it's got some dents here, it's got a scratch here, and I had to do something to the frame. Okay, so it's not worth that. But it's worth a good amount of money. Okay. This one right here, probably in the neighborhood of $700 to $800. These are actually, believe it or not, these are actually the most collectible Meadville rye that you can actually get. Stuff like that. Let me see. This I have no clue. I've never seen another one. Okay? So I wouldn't even know, and I'm not going to sell it, so I don't know. The boxes right here, $200 range. Okay? The back bar bottles, probably 80 to 100 each. Okay? The spider bottle, probably 10 to 15, depending upon the label. Okay, the label on it. This one has the label on it, and if somebody actually wants to collect it, you got to find a buyer first. The advertising mirrors, probably 35 to 40.
If you can find them.
If you can find them. That's. I've only seen one of these. Okay, I can't tell you. I paid $25 for this, and the guy got yelled. The guy who sold it to me got yelled at by his wife for selling it too expensive to me. But I bought this one real early. I bought this one probably 12 years ago. I've been collecting for about 14 years or so. So that was a fair price for this one back then. Okay.
Your wife yelled at him, and your wife yelled at you.
Yeah, it's a good thing to have happen. The calendar, I think, was probably in the $70 range. $70 range. This thing cost me. Shh! Don't tell my wife. Shot glasses are very collectible. And so you got to be careful on this thing right here. I'm collecting Meadville Rye whiskey, but I'm also bidding against the guy who's a shot glass collector. Okay, so stuff like this, even though this is not a very good example, it is an example. This one was $70-some.
On eBay, right?
On eBay, yeah.
I watched you bid on that.
Did you?
Yeah, I kept watching it.
Well, you know.
I kept thinking, why? Because it's not in that great condition. But I thought, okay, somebody wants it.
I found, I actually go to all sorts of extent, all places to look for Meadville Rye whiskey. I heard in the Pittsburgh show that there was one of these sitting in an antique mall in Clarion. Okay? Yeah, try to find a shot glass in Clarion on an antique shelf, okay? Wasn't going to happen, so it didn't end up, but this one did end up here. I'm sure there's more out there, but they're probably sitting in all sorts of people's collectors. My buddy George bought me this one for my 50th birthday. So he bought me this one for my 50th birthday, and it is just a prized possession of this one. Again, they would slap a label on just about anything that they could do, or they would do. This isn't the original handle; it didn't have it, but I got a handle anyways. That way, I do have a handle with that one. They were very ingenious. This one I bought. This is actually somebody took and glued 3 labels on here, and then took the time and effort to put some sort of finish on it. And there's a Meadville Rye whiskey label underneath it. It's very unique and very different. So I had to have that one. I forget what, I didn't pay a whole lot for this one, but I'm real happy with this one too. So, any other questions? Did that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you.
Yes.
I hate to intrude again. silver Chevy pickup, license number YHK7962, blocking somebody's driveway. They're waiting for towing.
Must not be in here.
Yes.
What was the total distribution area, and how do they market the product? How do they sell the product?
I don't know that. I'm slowly but surely trying to find that out. I've got as far as Troy, New York, which is in eastern, New York. They've got a bottle from there. I've got it as far west as Cleveland, which I had that bottle right there. I had as far west as Cleveland and Youngstown. I know it got that far. I know it was over in Bucyrus, because I got on that. I know this bottle took it over into the Corey area, over there. I think...
You had Montreal in there.
I had Montreal, but I think that had to do more with Prohibition, and they needed to get that stuff out and to make a dime before they weren't allowed to sell it at all. So that was a guess. To answer your question?
Well, how do they sell it? They have salesmen running around selling Meadville Rye Whiskey? How do they handle that?
That I can't tell you. All I know is that there is an awful lot of advertisements that go along with that. There was the trading cards right here. There was pamphlets that they had right there. Pamphlets. They had signs. They had lithographs. They had their on here. And in addition to that, they speak, of course it's the centennial and the sesquicentennial, but they speak very, very highly of how good it was. And in fact, in one of Cobb's own recipe books right here that he has, and he's from Frankfort, Kentucky, he's got all sorts of recipes. This is dated 1937. He's got a Meadville Rye whiskey right down there. So I think it had a wonderful reputation, There's a gentleman that a lot of the companies, Keebert, and I could be wrong with this one. Keebert advertised in Pennsylvania Farmer, and he had Meadville Rye in there. I just haven't bought one of his papers to get a little advertisement in there. I probably should, but I haven't.
Can George attest to the quality of the product?
Neither one of us have touched it. Okay?
Can I tell the story?
No, I tell it better. I tell it better.
Tell the story.
We went to an auction out in Hardesty's, Dan Hardesty's auction house out in Franklin, okay? They had a box, and they had 4 full bottles. And they also had they had probably around 4 or 5 of these sleeves right here. Well, I went there with the idea I was going to buy them. George says, good, let's go for it, okay? Well, we started bidding on it. He says, what do you think it's going to go for? And I said, George says, I think it'll go around $300. I said, okay. You ready to go, George? Ready to go, okay? So it went to 300, and then it went to 400, and then it went to 500. And I'm looking over George, and George is kind of getting a little nervous over there, okay? Then it went to 600, went to 700. Looked over, George is getting a little green.
But we still kept bidding.
Went to 800, went to 900. I think George was underneath his chair at that point in time. I said, I think it's about time I actually stopped. The bid went, and it went for $950, and we weren't going to get it. We weren't going to get it at all. But we had a lot of fun. It was great to see George under the table that way.
Not from the rye whiskey.
Right. Actually, a full bottle did put him under the table, but not for that reason. Okay. I still claim I'd like to break it open one of these days, and I probably will. But who knows? There was a question. Scott, you have another question?
Yeah, when they stopped making the whiskey because of Prohibition, and then they went to the medicine, what would have been the alcoholic content of that?
We've still been. I don't know. It's on here. It may be on here, and I'm going to guess it. Unfortunately, oh, it's also 100 proof. Well, I mean, hey, if you're sick, you got to have some alcohol, right? You got to treat that problem that you have, okay? It's amazing that the government outlawed it for everybody else and then kept it for themselves, which is there. Ralph?
How did they ship it?
I'm going to guess probably by train. And you probably, and I can remember my uncle having that run to Salamanca, New York, and I haven't found anything at the end of Salamanca, New York, but every once in a while I'll go up there and hunt around and see if I can't find something. But I do believe that it went by train. Everything went by train from Meadville. Meadville was a huge train depot right here, and they shipped the barrels off wherever they are. Now, if you figure out that at one time those if you can imagine 50 foot by 112, 7 stories, 8 stories, 8 stories, completely filled with barrels of whiskey. Okay? There should be a lot of barrels floating around someplace. All empty, but there's got to be some barrels floating, and I haven't seen any. I've seen more of the boxes right there. Anything else? Yes?
On the picture, it shows one of the buildings marked as an elevator. How was that used before?
It was a grain elevator. Okay, and I'm not exactly, I really don't know. All I know is that the grain had to start in that elevator someplace, and I'm guessing that from what I have, I'm guessing it was probably a grain elevator, because there was a conveyor belt. There was a conveyor belt that ran from there to that building, which was called the, what did I call it? I did call it the distilling room, okay? This I got down at the Historical Society. They were real good at this right here. This is actually from 1912, and they had to submit, they submitted this, I think, as a fire plan, because on every one of these things, they were very, very specific on where every one of their fire extinguishers were. So I think it was one of those things. They have that down there, and they kindly copied this for me, and that was real nice. But it gives all the information. It also helped me in one of the books that I did. It said that the warehouses were 75 by 112, and I just knew that couldn't be. And then off of this, I found out that they were 50 by 112. So, you know, and like I said, you know, I'm giving you the information as I know it today. Tomorrow, maybe something will come on, and I'll change. It'll change. Something will change. I buy bottles like this with tax stamps on it. That's really what I want to get on it, because it tells me when this label was used. So this was made in 1914, and it was bottled in 1918. So this was a 1918 label. Okay, and that kind of helps me with that stuff right there. Yes.
How much is the bottle like that go for?
These are probably $30, $35 bottles. They're not real expensive. The only person who's going to buy one like this is a Meadville Rye Whiskey collector or someone from Meadville. It really doesn't. That's part of the problem with it. In the bottle collecting, color's king, and these are boring colors. And they have a paper label on them, and embossing is king. So if you have an embossed bottle, an older bottle that has great color, now you're talking some money. Okay. Even the Swan's Bitters bottle, that's a Meadville bottle. It's one of the that's probably a $200 bottle in amber. You change it to green, and it's like a $700-800 bottle. It's an expensive bottle, but that's another program. Yeah.
Were the wooden cases and barrels made in Meadville? Don't know that.
I am almost I don't know the answer to that. I just don't. I would believe that the way when they went about on your sheet, they went about in 1904 to really to expand in 1904. One of the goals that they had was to make as much in-house as they possibly could. Okay? So whether they made their own barrels or not, I have no clue. But that was one of the things that they wanted to do. They did not want to deal with, because if you don't control what you're making, then you're suspect that your formula could change and everything. And they were very, very, that's why when I talked about the rye malt, I said I'm almost willing to bet that it was made on there, because that's the way they controlled it. They were just so picky about everything. 12% moisture in that grain is amazing. I mean, who would even think to consider the moisture content in the grain? Okay, I would have bet that they probably tried to use the finest stuff out there, and even the ginger ale that they tried to produce was so fine that it ran out of business because they couldn't sell it to anybody. It was too expensive. Yes.
Did they use locally harvested rye, or was it imported?
Don't know.
And where would do you know what the water source would have been?
In this book right here, and I'll read from here. This is this book right here, which has got some great photos, and I hope that right in here they wrote, if I can find it real quickly, they wrote that it came from the pure waters of Spring Run. Okay, they diverted Spring Run. Okay, and if you think about the name that they took back in 1920, which was, well, it was French Valley Springs, but that's what's in this book right here. And I don't have any information. I don't doubt that. I just don't know. Oh, is Ann here?
Yeah.
Hi, Ann Stewart. Nice book.
Water was taken from Spring Run, which was not diverted. The little square building was built there, and so there was a pumping station for it. It was just pure water that ran down off Fredericktown Hill.
Where was that?
Seemed to do a good job. Okay.
There were several runs that came down on
Right.
top of that hill. One of them went to the brewery down the road.
Yeah, if you start to really look at and go back to the Centennial, which was published in 1888, you'll see that Meadville had quite a few breweries and distilleries. Okay, proud heritage there. Okay, but I'm sure that it created problems too. Yes.
When the plant was in full operation, did you ever hear or see it in any of the books or any of the records, how many people are employed?
The only, I'll tell you what, on the 1912 version, if you look at the picture on 1912, there was 31 people that were employed there. Okay? Now, and I would in their modernization process, I would believe, and I could be wrong, that they would have worked on reducing employees instead of making more. And even though they were a bigger outfit, I would have believed they would have reduced the number of employees. So they might have, and if you go back when they had the cattle that were right there and they were feeding them right there, the slop, okay, I would have bet they probably would have had more employees there. I got off of the internet's a wonderful, wonderful source. And what a lot of the guys are doing is they're taking the old directories, the old directories, they're putting them on CD so that you can put them in your computer. And on the, I got the 1899 city directory, Meadville City Directory. It listed where the people lived and what occupation they had. And I started through that. Just to see if I couldn't figure out if anybody that actually worked there. I haven't gotten very far with that. I'm retired, but I'm working all the time. So, You retire so you can work more, I think, but, okay. Anyone else?
That slop that they fed the cattle, did that have any alcohol content left in it that you know of?
It didn't have any alcohol content in it at all. The alcohol came after they got all that liquid that was with that off, which was the wort, okay? That then went from there, it went to the fermenting plant where they put the yeast in it. After the grain was totally gone was when they put the yeast in it. That produced the alcohol.
The reason I asked the question is because years ago during Prohibition, I'm a Polish extract, and the majority of the Polish people made their own rye whiskey. Mm-hmm. And when they got rid of the grain, the chickens used to get into it. It had alcohol. The chicken would be
I believe it. If you look, I did get a book on actually how the process happened, because as I started looking through this, to understand the plant and understand my collectibles, you really got to understand how they actually distilled the rye whiskey. And if you look at it, there are so many different formulas out there. And the guy said, you know, some of them use 70% rye, 20% barley, 10%. Other ones use this formula, this formula. That Kratz was a chemist biologist. He was a pretty intelligent man, it appeared to be, and there would have been a formula that they had that they would have adhered to so that it wasn't changing.
Well, my father was a chemist, a biologist, a manufacturer, and a drinker.
A taster. Any other questions? Yes.
That manager you speak of, his name was Gita Kratz.
Kratz, was it?
Kratz.
K-R-A-A-T-Z. What was his first name?
Gita. I knew him.
Oh, did you? Yeah, he came back. He came back the second time around.
Yes,
came back and I'm sure he was real happy to do it because he was toiling up in Michigan, and he had the formula. So they bought the formula from him, and then made him plant manager too.
Right.
Okay.
Well, the Black 36 Buick.
Was it a new Buick? Darn new, yeah. There was, and that was amazing that they brought that thing back. They tried to bring that back, and apparently it went for a good number of years during the Great Depression. Yeah, it was in 33 after they repealed Article 18.
My oldest brother worked over there when they were reconstructing there.
That would have been cool. There is one new building over there that you can date to the new, and I think it's a drying tower over there of some sort.
The office building is still there.
Office building is still over there, yeah. That's still over there. I think that's a church now. Last time I drove by it, I thought it was a church over there. Yeah, with some sort. Yeah, that's kind of cool. I mean, it's a nice.
Dr. Winslow's brother, Orrin Winslow, he was pretty prominent in that too.
Yeah, like I said, there are a lot of people from the Buffalo area were real instrumental in putting this thing together, and that's why they kept it up there. Anything else? Yes.
Stock certificates. Have you seen any? Or
No, I haven't seen a single one. I have not seen anything from 1933 on. And the way you can tell a bottle that's on a 1933 on is that you'll see it is that from 1933 to about I think 1960 something. There's a little embossing on the back of those bottles that says federal law prohibits the sale of this bottle or reuse of this bottle or something like that. That was by law had to go on the back of any bottle that was bottled after Prohibition. It had to be on there. I've not seen anything. And it makes me wonder because there should be a lot of stuff out here. I mean, they had $1 million to sink into there. I have no clue what happened to it. I mean, I haven't seen anything.
These are sheriff certificates, stock shares.
Okay.
The company sold.
Haven't seen anything. I'm sure, I don't know, there's probably a lot of what I call closet collectors out there. You could be driving down the street and they've got, you know, stuff in there in your house that you would just go, wow, that's unbelievable. Who knows who's got something out there like that? But George and I are friends, so George invited me over, and we've been talking about this for a while, so I'm glad we were able to do this.
You said after they sold the feedlot that they were drying the grain and sending it to Germany.
Yeah.
What was the Germans using with
Feed cattle.
Oh, they are using it.
They're using it to feed cattle. Yeah, once they get rid of in 1904, they got rid of the cattle part of it, the fattening of cattle. Well, you can't leave that grain wet. It comes out of there wet. It's going to rot. It's going to rot if you leave it wet. So it needed to be dried in order to be put into bags to be shipped. And Germany was Meadville Rye Whiskey's biggest client for that. So, and what happened when World War I rolled around, I don't know what impact that had on exports. But I'm sure there's records sitting around someplace, just a matter of doing some more digging.
I just found out a couple years ago that there was a Shendley whiskey down towards Pittsburgh. And that Shendley whiskey was brought in big carboys from Germany and blended down there. Huh.
Yeah, there's a lot going on. If you get an opportunity to go to a bottle show, they do have a lot of paper label stuff down there, and depending upon the collector, if they're collecting that particular distillery or brewery, will depend upon how expensive something sells for. I mean, I've seen stuff sell for astronomical prices simply because you get so many collectors that collect that particular bottle, that particular brewery, distillery. Anyone else?
I'm curious to know if there's anyone else here besides myself who remembers seeing the distillery when it was making the Meadville Rye. Which one?
Anybody remember that?
I remember it. Like about 1918.
About 1918? I'd love to see a picture of it, I'll tell you. That would be a...
You know how they got the barrels over from their distillery over to the warehouse?
No, but tell me.
I do. I saw them do it.
How'd they do it?
When I walked out to Ray Street going to my grandfather's farm over on Dunham Road and the Rogers Ferry Road, and I would walk out Ray Street there, and before, sometimes I would go over there and stay in summertime, and sometimes when you got close to the distillery, you could smell that aroma in the air. It smelled good. I didn't know what it was. Anyhow, what fascinated me was there was a wooden walkway. Went from the distillery across over the top of the dirt street at that time, over to the warehouse. And I would see men rolling big barrels across there from the distillery over to the warehouse. That's how they did it. Now I'm wondering if they didn't work in the wintertime, how under the sun did they ever keep the snow above it if they had a storm like we've had now? Kept the men busy all the time shoveling the snow off of it.
Yeah,
that's how they got the barrels over there.
Yeah,
the warehouse is on the right-hand side,
right,
back of the office up there at that time.
Yeah, I don't think the plant was running 12 months a year, and chances are pretty good. You're probably right. They probably closed down in the winter time. Probably did that. Although if you're a glass blower, you're just the opposite. You do all your work in the winter because of the heat. And I just don't plain know. If I knew, I'd be able to tell you. maybe someday I'll run into an article or someplace. I go over, you know, that microfilm that they put all those papers on. Sometimes I go up there and just, if I come over from Cleveland, I go upstairs and I just take a shot in the dark and say, give me 1912, which paper do you want? There must have been quite a few papers. I grab a hold of a paper and I put it in there and I just go through the spindle and just see if I can find something that's interesting. And sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. Anything else?
Another thing too, I remember very distinctly after Prohibition, I can remember hearing people saying about the soldiers coming back from World War I. They were very disgruntled and mad on account of Prohibition. Most of them have been to Gay Paris, you know, and all the liquor they wanted over there, and then they come back to the United States. Now they can't buy whiskey or beer legally, so they didn't like that very well.
Well, they considered that social experiment to be a failure. So, anything else? If you'd like to come up and see what I got up here, I'd be more than happy to show you anything that's up here. George is here, Vivian's here, my wife is here. All you got to do is just ask one of us, and we'd be kind of come over and show it to you. Okay. One of the things that's really stays strong in my heart as being a bottle collector is something that one of our members mentioned one time, and it really stays true to me, and that is that all that you see up here, I really don't own. I'm just the caretaker for the next generation, and that's very true. My daughter's already claimed a part of that. I didn't think my daughters were going to like any of this, and they're already starting to talk about, I want the Meadville Rye whiskey stuff. And so it's close to their heart too. So if you want to come up and see anything I got up here, we'd be more than happy to grab a hold of it and show it to you. No big deal, okay? Thank you very much.